mean geopolitically or just from an investment standpoint?
Geopolitically.
That is generally done by the people that profit from it. And that's not the average person or investor who's buying farmland or something like that. There is a book actually that I would recommend, and it was by a former general, Medley Butler, and the book is written in 1935 and it's still very relevant today. It's called War is a Racket. And after fighting in the Spanish-American War, Philippines, a number of these other things, he concluded that these wars are based solely to benefit certain people. And he had an interesting solution that would be very controversial to implement. But he said, if you're going to draft people to be in war, they should be the only ones that should be allowed to vote for it. Secondly, he said, if you're going to conscript people and force them to go to war, then the capital should equally be conscripted for war. So you take, 5% of everybody's accounts or whatever. Obviously, that would cause a major uprising. And that was his point. He also said that we should not be involved in wars unless it involves U.S. soil, not Philippines and all these other places. And he was actually, he had the Medal of Honor. I mean, he couldn't be ignored. He was, prestigious at the time. And I would recommend to read his book. It's very, very enlightening, and he calls it War is a Racket. And it was actually Eisenhower who I think maybe read his book and kind of popularized the idea of the military complex. Because that's basically what he was talking about. The reason we're going into war is, quite frankly, governments refuse to reform. And, I've been dealing with them for 50 some years. And nobody's ever been able to answer a question. Why are we borrowing if you have no intention of paying anything back? I have yet to ever get an answer from any government. Well, that's just what everybody does, and that's pretty much it. And I think this is all coming to a head. And it's from the political elite, not the average person or even the average corporation. It's the government knows it's in trouble. And instead of reforming, they become more authoritarian. And that's where we're heading into like this 2032 stuff. It was like Vance stood up there at the Munich Security Conference and gave them hell about restricting free speech. Because that's what it is. We don't want people criticizing us, so shut them up. They think that they can stop that. All right. What they did to me was the same thing. Instead of saying, maybe the computer model I developed actually worked, Instead, they prefer to say, "Oh, it's just me, and I have untold influence because I have more, minions following me than they did." And so they tried to take me out of the game, but nothing changed. I mean, the market still crashed. Whatever, '07, it crashed, and they were saying on the floor, "Oh, it's Armstrong's revenge," because it comes out to the very day. So it's not me, but this is the way they are, as well. I mean, it's like, let's clamp down, shut down all the free speech, so we'll be able to control what we need to control, and it's not going to work.
I had a thought with Rebecca Koffler and Alex Craner when they were on last week, and what I see happening, and you just pointed it out, right? By silencing voices, they don't have the they'd call it dissent, and I would just call it common sense entering, like balancing the conversation, and that allows them to keep doing what they're doing. Do you think that in their head they go, if we remove Armstrong, if we remove whoever else is there, that won't happen. We'll just we're right. We'll just keep going this way, and we'll be good. Because they've been, not only your voice, but like a ton of voices, if they don't walk in a certain narrative, they get removed. And so now they get to be like, yep, we're right. This is exactly what's going to happen. And now they don't hear the other side of the tale. But the other side of the tale has its day. Like the other side of as you pointed out with the market crash.
Yeah, I mean, they tried it with COVID, silencing anybody that criticized it. And I mean, I forget, I had done one podcast, and I wasn't really advocating anything other than I said, the problem was, the vaccines that caused a lot of civil unrest. And it was, YouTube, got all upset and had to make sure that was taken down. And I wasn't even advocating anything. I was just stating a fact. But I used the word vaccine. Oh my God, it's like it was blasphemy or something. I don't know. But I mean, this is typical. If all governments will act like a cornered wild animal, and they will not reform. They will fight to the death, really. And this is what revolutions are about. They get indoctrinated with their own power. Just like, any drug, it's just an addict, become an addict to it. And they only look at things from their perspective. And that's the problem. I mean, so we end up, what the computer is forecasting is historically always the outcome. It's nothing new. They will fight to the end. Carney was, he ran against Trump. That's basically what, he didn't address all the domestic issues or things of that nature. He was running against Donald Trump. You look at Europe, all they talk about is Putin, Putin, Putin. They don't deal with their own issues. NATO should have been shut down. The only purpose of NATO was to defend against the Warsaw Pact. That all fell apart. So to keep their jobs, they have to keep saying the same nonsense as Khrushchev. Oh, Putin's wants to take all of Europe. For what? Khrushchev, it was communism is better than capitalism. It was like an economic religion. All right? Putin's been there for 26 years. He hasn't made any such moves. And he's not a communist, and he's not an oligarch. and Europe has nothing worthwhile conquering. They have to buy their energy from Russia. They don't have gold, deposits and stuff like this. At least, like when you look at Asia, why did Japan invade Manchuria? Because it was profitable. All right, they had to buy their energy from the United States. They had no natural resources, so they invaded Manchuria to get that. Just look at wars throughout the centuries. I mean, Alexander the Great conquered all these different countries because it was profitable. The soldiers participated in the spoils. You think he could have said, let's go invade this country. You're not going to get anything because there's no value, but I just want to do it. They wouldn't have followed. Simple as that, But this is, governments, this is, why governments fail. Because honestly, if that statement was wrong, we would still be speaking Babylonian, there isn't a government that has survived, period. The one that lasted the most was the Roman Empire, and that at least did so because they were not involved in all this socialistic nonsense. When they conquered a country, they allowed it to keep its culture, its gods, whatever. It didn't say you have to now do ours. So, I mean, as long as it was a common market, it was beneficial to be part of Rome rather than to be outside. You can make vases in Gaul or France and sell them to somebody in Syria. You couldn't do that if you were outside. So it was free trade that basically had no income tax or anything of that nature. The maximum tax was about 7%. That's why people stayed. That's why Rome lasted for 1,000 years. It's the income tax is a Marxist dream because they've always wanted to. They hate people that have more than they do, and that's even in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Why? Because this has been a human fault for a long time. Sparta was a communist state. They never even issued coins because they didn't want anybody to have any material wealth. They invaded and destroyed Athens in 404 BC. So, I mean, the fact that that's in the Ten Commandments shows that this has been around for a very long time. It's not something new.
When you, this 2032 date, and I've probably said this every time you come on, every time that year comes up. That was the first time in 2020 was the first time I heard you say 2032, and I'm like, 2032? What is he talking about? And as we march closer to it, we're 7 years away, or I guess less than 7 years away now. What do you see in the next 7 years? And if I could just add into that, like Putin is, barring health or something crazy like, I don't know, an assassination, he's going to be still in power. You got Trump, who's got a few more years left. You got Carney, who, unless they find a way to call an early election, he's going to be around till 2029. I'm sure you could walk through every world leader. So I just look at Putin and the way he's been positioning himself, and it kind of, the visualization I have of it is Muhammad Ali on the ropes. He's just tiring the opposing force out as they try and drill him and try and get him to react. But you slowly close in on 2032. At some point, I assume he does react, or the West goes into full-out war. But maybe what do you see in the lead up to 2032?
Well, I think Putin is the smartest guy in the ring. I mean, he's clearly the smartest head of state that's out there. And he understands the game. He's put down so many different red lines. Oh, if you send, give missiles to Ukraine and they attack inside of Russia, that's going to be it. They do. He doesn't do anything. They have deliberately crossed every single red line he's put down. Why? Because they need him to attack anything in NATO so they can claim he's the aggressor. Then they can draft, we're the guys with the white hats. Go, you have to go die for us. I have friends that are Vietnam vets, and now they see the truth. That the tapes have come out. Johnson knew it was a lie. We were never attacked. They just made up the Tonkin Gulf stuff. He even said, for all I know, they were shooting at whales that night. You have John, McNamara, who was the neocon Secretary of State, took us into Vietnam. You can see his apology on YouTube. He said, very sorry before he died. We were wrong. We thought Russia was involved. It was just a civil war. Well, 58,000 Americans died, and how many millions of other people? So I have friends that have been in Vietnam, and now they're pissed off as hell because they were lied to as to what they were actually there doing. And that's why I recommend this book, War is a Racket, because it's always a lie. Weapons of mass destruction never existed. Germany had put out an ad in the New York newspapers. Do not sail on the Lusitania. They're using it for, to covert weapons. Oh, absolutely no way. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't use, private citizens as a shield. They sunk the boat. They used that for World War I. And then in 1987, you can look up an archaeologial magazine. They discovered where it was. And then suddenly the government comes out, oh, be careful, there's ammunition in the hull. They lie about everything. They never have told the truth about one single war yet. Just the way it is. Excuse me.
I use the Lusitania all the time because after you told me that story, probably what was that, a year or two ago, I find that story really interesting because there's articles written on it as late as 2013 is the one I'm thinking of, but I'm sure there's more where they talk about sending divers down and you can see the armaments and you can just see it, how you can go back and look at the newspaper clippings and be like, holy crap, right? And so nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody's alive. There's probably a few people that are still alive, but for most of us, that's before our time. There's no emotional connection to that other than we've learned about World War I. And so when I share that story, I'm like, they're right there, okay? The great United States, who would never lie to you or have your best interest at heart, pulled you into a war off of doing something that sacrificed American lives so that they could then get the emotional response from the U.S. public that they were looking for so they could justify going to war. When you fast forward to today, are we getting smarter or are we not? Because you go they are pushing as hard as they can for a war with Russia. It's got to insane levels. Just what was that? 10 days ago, roughly, they hit Russia, deep within Russia, and they're looking for the response back, I assume, of what Putin's going to do. And you go, well, why would they do that? Well, they want war with Russia, and they need something to justify it to not only the American people, the Canadian people, the people of Britain, the people of Germany and France, and all the different places. And right now, they can paint this big bad man, big boogeyman of Putin, but nobody wants war, or at least that's the sense I get. What do you see?
The elite want it. The average person, no. We get nothing out of it. I can tell you that NATO has already told Canada to boost its military spending, and they will impose drafts in Canada for this. This is what's coming. That's why they wanted Carney. The EU was, interfered in the Romanian elections twice. Why? Because Romania, they were building the biggest NATO base in all of Europe to attack Russia. Look, you can go on Wikipedia, look at, Google up Project Northwoods. And there was a proposal which has been declassified. They proposed killing Americans, blaming it on Cuba to justify an invasion. And Kennedy refused and shut it down. That's one of the reasons he wanted to shut the CIA down. And lo and behold, the CIA ends up taking him out. There's documents. I put it on there. One CIA guy, a document that finally just came out, thanks to Trump. The CIA guy told his friends that a group of CIA agents killed Kennedy, and he was afraid for his life. He was then shot to death in Washington a few weeks later. Look, these are nasty people. They only see their side of the coin. That's it. And anybody that opposes them is just, a traitor or whatever. It's my concern is that they would create a false flag, just like this Project Northwoods tried to justify a Cuban, invasion, killing Americans and blaming it on somebody else. This is how they create these wars. Weapons of mass destruction never existed. And I'm concerned that Putin understands what's going on. That's why he will not attack NATO. He will respond, yes, but against Ukraine. Okay. They just want war with Russia. Simple as that. You have these neocons. I've been to dinner with some of them. I can tell you that it was Bill Kristol's father that created the movement. And I knew Bill. I argued with him. He even spoke at one of our conferences. And I argued with him back in the 90s. He said, if we take out Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi will bring peace to the Middle East. Total bullshit. I said, you've obviously never been there. They don't see themselves as Syrian Iraqis, or they see themselves as Shiite versus Sunni versus Kurd. This is it. It's just, I don't know. I really think that they were psychologically damaged in the 50s, having to hide underneath their desks during air raid drills or something. But, as I've said before, I was in Washington when Gorbachev made his speech and Reagan wanted to go meet him. And they told Reagan they couldn't say he was a communist anymore, so they said, well, you can never trust a Russian. So it was like they just need an enemy. All right, fine, they were communists before. Well, all right, they're not communists, but they're just Russian now. So what's the issue? At least Gorbachev was trying to take, communism and eradicate capitalism. I understand that. That's not the question today. You go to China, you go to Russia, Eastern Europe. Nobody wants to go back to communism. Even, China, it's, yes, they kept the name of Communist Party. Are they communists? Of course not. But if they change the name of the party, they then have to admit that Mao was wrong and take his picture off the Forbidden Wall, or the Forbidden City, But so that's Asian culture. So they're not communists. Everybody has private ownership, whatever. and they're not going to ever be able to go back. Same thing in Russia. Same thing in Eastern Europe. There's no shot at going back to communism. And it's we now have to deal with communism light version, which is socialism, which is the same bullshit. Equality. Really. You're trying to change human nature. They don't like the fact that somebody makes more money than they do. Well, Henry Ford invented the assembly line. And instead of saying, how many jobs has he created? They basically just say, excuse me, how much money has he made? He created a whole industry. That's irrelevant. Oh, he made money. That's bad. This is what these people are. They can't stand that somebody else has more than they have. And that's what the Ten Commandments was about. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. And they have been doing this forever.
When you brought up a military draft, that's coming. Like it's a foregone conclusion. My brain goes right now. Maybe I'm wrong about Canada, but I'm like, it would have to be something serious to implement a military draft where people would go along with that. Or do you just think they implement it and then you have a lot of civil unrest over that idea?
These people tend to think, they believe their own bullshit. They think, I write a law and they will have to comply. This is the way they actually look at it. They don't look at practical things. There's a very interesting speech. I put it on. It's on my site. That one of the at the Nuremberg trials, they asked one of the top German generals, how did you get the German people to go to war, etc.? And he says, oh, that's easy. You just tell them they're going to be attacked. And anybody that's against it, you call them, basically traitors. And this is standard. You're seeing it with COVID. Anybody that was against COVID, oh, they're dangerous, they're this or that. I mean, they demonize them. This is what they will do, and this is what Germany did, and this is what every country does. So,
is our time different in the sense, like one of the things I admire about you is your knowledge of history. Where we sit right now, the trust in our media has got to be at all-time lows.
Yeah, it is.
So them demonizing, like I think of Alberta and the conversation around independence right now. They're coming out with the same traitor, this, that, everything else, and I don't know. There's a growing. I don't know what the number is, but there's a growing portion of the population in Alberta specifically just doesn't give a crap of what they say we are. They just don't care. It's like, I don't care what you call it. And if you
your polls are close to 60% in favor of leaving Canada. Look, I'll tell you how to be the star in the world. You separate. Don't join the United States. And the reason I say that, if you separate, become your own independent nation, not, sovereign within Canada like Quebec. Separate. You eliminate income tax. All right, you put a flat 15% corporate tax, period, and a retail sales tax. That's it. You do that, you will find your houses are going to go up, everybody's going to want to move there. Companies will develop there. Employment will skyrocket. Why? Look, as you know, I restructured multinational companies. Got to meet Margaret Thatcher, and I was putting like auto manufacturers and anybody needs skilled labor in Britain. And she asked me why was I doing that? I said, because if I paid the exact same wage to somebody in Germany as I do in Britain, the regulations on top of that the company must pay is 40% higher in Germany versus Britain. She wasn't aware of that. All right. I got called in by one of the top German companies over there at the time. And they said, we need you here at our board meeting first thing in the morning. I said, what's up? Oh, you'll find out when you get here. I get there, they appoint our firm advisor to the pension fund, and everybody's resigning. I said, what the hell is going on here? And they had asked the government to reduce their workforce by 20%. Government approved. Then at the last minute, equality came in. It's not fair for you to pick and choose. You have to make the offer, I think it was $150,000, to voluntarily give up your job. So what happens? The people that knew they could get a job across the street took the $150,000 and left. The people that couldn't get a job someplace else, the very ones that they wanted to get rid of, stayed. All right, and I told this story to a board member of the IMF. And they said to me, you're absolutely right. We found the same thing in Greece took place. I said, it's human nature. You cannot change human nature with these socialistic ideas of equality. We're not all equal. We're equal in rights only, not in talent. You don't want me to be a brain surgeon. This is just the way it is. You don't, get in a cab and the guy looks like, nice, gee, you're free tomorrow. I need some teeth pulled out,
Well, you could do that. I don't think the experience would be that good.
It would probably make a good TV show, But I mean, it's just, we're all different. We have different talents. So, but that's what communism refused to, they tried to reduce everybody to the same drone status. And socialism does the same thing. All right? And all you hear about it, equality, it's not fair, he's got more than I have. It's, not everybody wants to work so much. Some people are workaholics like me, and other ones like as least you can possibly do, you do. That's human nature. You cannot go against that. So, these people in government, they think they can. They have the pen to make a law, and if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to put your ass in jail. That's fine for an individual. When you get a society moving up, that report I just put out was inspired by Alberta. Right? It's on our site for, I think, 1995. How to separate. I went through all the separations of government throughout history. I was surprised when I did the research, and that's the way you should do research. You don't start with a presumption. Separation takes place. Most average was less than 15% of the people. Because the majority ends up just going with the flow. I had lunch with probably 30 years ago in Vancouver. Mike Campbell was there, but his brother Gordon. And I think Gordon at the time was the mayor of Vancouver or something. I forget. Then he went off and became, the ambassador for, Canada in London. And I forget what it was. But there was some sort of protest, and they were in front of his house and making a real ruckus, and the TV cameras were there. And he said to me, Marty, he said, because we were talking about politics, and he said, the minority always gets what they want because they are the ones that make a real ruckus. The TV cameras come out and show them, and then you're forced to basically respond to that. He says the vast majority of people never get off their ass. And he was right. And he told me that at a breakfast meeting, I think it was. It must have been 30, 40 years ago. And what I have seen ever since with different governments and with this report, it confirmed it. I mean, I was shocked. I went through all the various different revolutions, and they were always with a minority. The biggest minority I ever saw was finally towards the end of the American Revolution, up to 40% wanted revolution. Still not the majority. You see the same thing in France. The vast, I would say, most common was less than 15%.
So if you had less than 15% of the population, or 15% or less, that wanted something, or I guess separation, or to get out of what they were in, that's when it happens.
Yeah, it's.
So when you sit here,
you're already at least at 40%.
Well, the last poll I saw was like 30-some% wanted it, and then there was like an additional, am I spacing on my numbers here? Was it 10%? Was it 20%? We're kind of like, So when you hit 30-some%, or like, we want this, you're in your world of the report you've done, of all the research, you go, oh, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's simple as that. It's, look, what I said at your conference was that when they created the Federal Reserve in 1913, they had 13 branches, and they were all independent. And the main thing was about they understood regional capital flows. Like 1906, the San Francisco earthquake, but the insurance companies are on the East Coast, so the money moves from the East to the West, and then there's a shortage of cash in the East, so banks fail, etc. So they created the Fed with 13 branches, and they were all independent. What happened? All right, FDR comes in, wants to create his New Deal, his socialistic agenda. He usurps all the power, sticks it in Washington, and so why do we still have 13 branches? They're irrelevant anymore. The interest rate is set by Washington, that's it. Now, Canada followed that model. So in the 80s, when you had a big real estate boom in Toronto, they're raising interest rates to absurd levels, and you're putting farmers and miners in bankruptcy in Alberta. There are regional differences, and one size does not fit all. Simple as that. And you have lost, basically, they have no, Trudeau had no respect for Alberta whatsoever. His agenda was coming from Klaus Schwab out of the WEF, and I know Klaus, okay? And Klaus was basically an academic. That's it. And it's always the academics. Oh, wouldn't the world be nice if we were all equal? It's all this bullshit again. And so Trudeau bought into that. And there's always a backdrop. Somebody's going to benefit. Who paid for Greta to fly to Alberta to say yes, cut off all the energy, surrender your jobs, and go on welfare? Who paid for that? All right, it's how's a 16-year-old girl become an expert in this bullshit anyhow? And all you have to do is just look at history, and you can see that climate change is BS. We've always had booms, rising temperatures, falling ice ages, warming periods, long before there were fossil fuels. It's a natural cycle of the Earth, period. You have the current already shifting in the Atlantic, and you're heading more towards colder periods. It's the warm water that in the Atlantic, the current that takes it up north, that keeps Europe even warm. I mean, just look at the map. Where does Rome sit? About very close to where New York is. Most of Europe is like where Edmonton is, where it's way up north. Yet there are palm trees you'll see on the Scottish coast, because the water is warm. And that circulation is shifting, and they know it has shifted before. The warm water doesn't go up there, you're heading into a very, very cold period for Europe. Crops will not grow. There'll be shortages of food. This is part of the natural cycle if you just sit back and look at actual history and forget the bullshit.
But once again, when you bring in climate, they've done the same thing there. Anyone who talks out against it, they remove them. Because I was watching a documentary on Capone and about Prohibition, and when it came in, his eyes lit up, and I'm, you probably know the story better than I do, because I've always been fascinated why the government thought getting rid of all alcohol was going to work, right? And then, of course, you get bootlegging because they see a huge need. What did the population want? They wanted access to alcohol. Simple as that. So what did entrepreneurs, although maybe of the criminal sort, do? They found a way to give the people what they wanted. And when you look at climate change or you look at different things, you just see people, if you follow the money and what they're doing, like you can actually start to see, well, they're creating a crisis, or they're creating this movement, and then they're profiteering off of it. And I was watching the thing on Capone, and I was like, it's never made sense to me. Like, I get the idea of like cutting out all alcohol, but I think it's just a terrible idea, because, people want it. So what are they going to do? They're going to find ways to get it. So Capone walks in, and he's got his background in the mafia, and they find a way to give it to him, And so then, I don't know, your thoughts, Martin?
It was the Prohibition that created the mafia. There was very little mafia organizations before that. That's what made them profitable. Drugs. All this stuff. You can outlaw it. There's somebody always going to do more drugs than they should have and died of an overdose. It's just the way it is. You cannot regulate human nature. You just can't. And some people are always going to, go. When we were kids, back in my day, you smoked because it meant, others are smoking, so that shows I'm grown up. And it had nothing to do. Was it something you really wanted to do? No. Peer pressure, whatever. But it's. The whole thing, it's always about government, and what you do is when you outlaw something, you create a black market. It's always going to be that way. You eliminate the paper currency, you go to digital currencies, there's going to be a black market. Always will be.
They just assume that by doing digital currency, the black market won't be that big?
They look, the way they look at it, and I have argued face to face with some of these people in governments about it, but they have these deficits, perpetual. They don't blame themselves, they blame us. Oh, it's because people aren't paying them what they should. So if they eliminate paper money, all right, and go to digital, they think they'll eliminate crime. And everybody will have to pay the taxes. We can just take it out of their accounts. This is what's coming. This is why they want it. It's the next stage in their desperate authoritarian maneuvers to retain power. And it's not going to work. Once they start doing stuff like that, and Europe is the one moving for it, the Fed came out and said they can't, and Trump said no. Because, really, they didn't give an explanation, but constitutionally they cannot. If the Fed created a central bank digital currency, it would need a search warrant to look at your account. So it can't do that. So you have the private banks trying to create things. That's fine. Okay? It's kind of like the COVID model. All right? The Constitution, First Amendment says the government shall not restrict free speech. Fine. They didn't do it. They picked up the phone, called YouTube, and said, hey, got that guy off. I didn't do it. YouTube did. This is the way that governments function. All right? It's like we're in a proxy war with Russia. Oh, well, we're not. It's Ukraine. Really? But we're giving the weapons to Ukraine to do it. I published on our site, Boris Johnson actually came out, and it's on the front page of the Nordic News. We're in a proxy war with Russia. He's admitted that Britain is at war with Russia. Publicly. We're not talking about conspiracy theories or my opinion versus somebody else's. This is reality. So I say, Putin understands what the risk is. Trump, I think, has been naive. If I'm Putin, there's no way I'm agreeing to any kind of a peace deal. Why? Because Europe is stabbing Trump in the back. They don't want peace. They want war. They're already admitting they're at war. And you had Merz out there. I can tell you that I have one politician that was in meetings in Brussels and called me and said, why is Germany the number one push for war? I said, because they're also the one that's failing. All right. I had another source attended the Vienna Peace Conference a couple of months ago. Same thing. Calls me and says, hey, this is no longer about peace. This is all about war. Preparing to draft people, etc., etc., etc. They want war. If I'm Putin, I'm looking at all this, what I know versus I'm sure he knows more. Would I agree to peace? Absolutely no way.
Why does failing countries equal war?
Because once the way we're in this Ponzi scheme of debt, and this is the real core problem. You have government, since basically Keynes approved the deficit, and they just do it all the time. They keep borrowing year after year after year with no intention of paying anything back. This is, the interest expenditures this year in the U.S. are $1 trillion. U.S. national debt hit 1 trillion in 1980 under Reagan. Now we're talking about just interest expenditures. I mean, the interest will crowd out everything else. It just multiplies. All right, it's like cockroaches. You're not. You got one, you're going to have 100 pretty soon. It will crowd out all other spending. It's already increased more than military. So it's not sustainable. Europe is a basket case. So the choice from their perspective, we either have war or the default comes when you can no longer sell the debt. All right? In the United States, the Treasury was not selling the debt directly. It had primary dealers. So to be a primary dealer, you had the guarantee to buy a certain amount of U.S. debt. So the new issue would come out, the banks would buy it, and then the banks would resell it. Okay? You are now reaching the point that you're beyond the capacity of the banks to even buy the new debt. It's more than their capitalization. The system is coming to an end. All right, and it comes crashing down when you can no longer issue new debt to pay off the old. When you can't sell the new debt, that's it. You can't pay off the old. It comes crashing down. You have laws in there that are self-destructive. All right, on average, at least 70% of all the pension funds in Europe must have government debt, even though it went negative. So Social Security, 100% U.S. government debt. You default on the debt, there goes Social Security. It's so interconnected that they need war as the diversion to keep the game going. So they think. But if they don't have war and they default, the people are going to be storming the parliaments in Europe with pitchforks. That's what will happen. And this is not, I'm just telling you what history does all the time. It's not an opinion. It's not, conspiracy theory or any other bullshit. It's straight up, this is what history shows us. It has a roadmap to the future. Simple as that.
I was wondering, you talk draft, coming here in the years to come. You've mentioned military drafts, CBDCs, censorship, which obviously all of us can see. When you look at drafts through different countries when they've implemented them, has it been universal that, most people are accepting of the draft and they carry on, or is it a pretty controversial